In 1864, during the Second Schleswig War, John lived in Denmark with his wife Marie, their son Creston, and his brother Peter. John and his family decided to move to the United States, while Peter chose to remain behind. Their journey began with a stagecoach. Soon after they boarded, the trip took an unexpected turn. A stranger forced a couple out of their seats, and two recently released prisoners, Paul and Lester, replaced them. At first, the men appeared calm. But calm was only the beginning of their descent into violence. This is the salvation. Because Marie and Creston did not speak English, John tried to reassure them by describing the house he had prepared. Later, while drinking together, Paul offered alcohol to Marie. She refused, but John persuaded her to accept. During the conversation, John shared details about his family situation, yet the men's focus on Marie grew uncomfortable. John eventually told Paul to stop, which angered him. Tension escalated when Lester pulled a gun on John, and Paul seized Marie, mocking John's inability to protect her. Acting quickly, John managed to take Lester's gun and drew his own weapon. He told Creston to hold Lester's gun, but Lester threatened the boy with a knife. Paul then revealed two more guns and gave John 5 seconds to leave the coach or his family would be harmed. John had no choice. He dropped his gun, and Paul forced him off the coach. Left behind, John ran after it with everything he had, but despite his determination, he could not catch up. Exhausted, he kept moving through the night until he reached a small shack, only to find it empty. In the distance, he saw Creston's body lying on the ground. He carried his son in his arms, crying as he walked. When he reached the stagecoach, the driver and guard were already dead. John laid Creston down, picked up a gun, and moved forward. Inside, he found Lester and shot him in the head. Paul tried to escape, shouting that Marie was alive. John gave no reply. He emptied the gun into Paul, then carried both his wife and son back home. News of the tragedy reached Peter, who rushed over. He found Marie and Creston dead and tried to comfort his grieving brother. Paul was the brother of Henry de Leroux, a gang leader and landowner. When Henry learned of Paul's death, he rode with his men to the town of Black Creek. Mayor Keene insisted that no one in town was responsible, but Henry refused to listen. He demanded the killer within 2 hours. If no one was handed over, he would execute 2 townspeople. If the town still resisted, he would kill 4 himself. At noon the next day, Mayor Keene chose 2 victims. One was an old woman who accepted her fate. The other was a legless man who begged for his life. Henry shot the man first. He then killed the old woman after she cursed him. Still unsatisfied, he shot another man in the face, claiming the first 2 deaths were not enough. The town had been paying Henry $80 for protection. Now he demanded $160 by the end of the month. The mayor had no idea how to raise the money. Henry buried Paul soon after. His widow Madeleine, who could not speak, attended the funeral. She longed for peace, but Henry swore he would take revenge. After burying his family, John and Peter gathered their belongings and went to town to sell what they owned, preparing to leave. At the old woman's shop, Peter instead found her grandson Wojciech, who explained that his grandmother had died. When Peter tried to sell animal skins, Wojciech learned they were hunters and urged them to stay and help defend the town against Henry's men. Peter warned him not to fight a battle he could not win, but Wojciech dismissed the warning and called him a coward. Meanwhile, John went to Mayor Keene to sell his land. Keene offered only $150, half of what John had paid 6 years earlier. He explained that Henry's fees had destroyed land value and hinted that if Henry's brother's killer was handed over, things might change. John realized then that Paul was Henry's brother and understood the danger he faced. He accepted the money, and Keene advised him to hide it in his boots. As John left, armed townsmen led by Sheriff Malik surrounded him. Malik shot him from his horse and had him taken into custody. At the same time, Henry and Madeleine met with representatives of the Standard Atlantic Oil Company. With Keene's support, Henry had been buying land in Black Creek and surrounding areas rich in oil. The company revealed they had intercepted Malik's request for federal help. Henry reminded them he was not fighting native tribes and told them to keep their business methods clean. John was locked in jail. Later, Peter was caught, beaten, and thrown into a cell beside him. John asked Malik to release Peter, since he was innocent, but Malik refused, saying Peter had injured his deputy. Malik then informed Henry about John's capture, believing it would save the town. He admitted Henry had once been a decent man but had grown cruel after fighting native tribes. Malik said if John had shown mercy to Paul, none of this would have happened. He believed John's death would buy time for the town, not knowing that his message for help had been intercepted. The next day, townspeople dragged John from his cell, beat him, and tied him to a horse. No one intervened. They brought him to Henry's camp and fastened him to a post. Henry introduced him to Madeleine as the man who killed Paul. John insisted Paul had murdered his son and harmed his wife, but Henry ignored his words.
No one asked you to talk.
Wanting to test the strength of a former soldier, Henry left him tied under the sun. Mayor Keene soon arrived. Before speaking with Henry, he removed John's boots and took the hidden money, saying John would no longer need it. Meanwhile, back in Black Creek, Peter overheard Sheriff Malik complaining about being held back at Massachusetts. Nearby stood the same guard Peter had mocked earlier. Peter insulted him again, saying no woman would want him with such a face.
You were ugly before I knocked out your teeth.
The guard lost control and rushed at him, but Peter quickly tripped him and knocked him unconscious. Meanwhile, Henry forced himself on Madeleine. She was upset but powerless to resist. That night heavy rain fell, and John remained tied up outside. Peter searched for a chance to act. When one guard left to get coffee, Peter quietly killed him with a blade, freed John, and carried him away. Two guards nearly caught them, but Peter shot them before they could react. The remaining guards opened fire, yet Peter managed to escape on horseback with John. John was too weak to ride and too heavy to carry far, so Peter hit him with a rifle and promised to return. Henry's men tracked their trail and split up when they found tracks leading in two directions. The next morning, John regained consciousness. He hid when he heard horses nearby. From his cover he saw Henry's men dragging Peter's body. Back at camp, Henry discovered his men dead and his money missing. Madeleine had stolen it and boarded a train with the cash. Henry's gang caught up and forced the train to stop. She pulled a gun and tried to flee to the rear, but they surrounded her. John, wandering the countryside, reached the home of Mrs. Whistler. Her husband had been killed by Henry. She aimed a gun at John but realized he only wanted water. She gave him food and let him rest in the barn. Her family was preparing to leave and offered to take him with them, but John refused. He needed to recover his strength for what he intended to do. Meanwhile, Henry's men captured Madeleine and dragged her back. She met his eyes without fear, even after he struck her. Although Henry wanted her dead, he first allowed his men to torment her, pressing a knife to her throat as they threatened her. While this was happening, John regained his strength and went to the mayor's house. He pointed a gun at him and demanded his boots, the stolen cash, and the land deed. Realizing that the mayor had been working with Henry, John forced Keene into a coffin, locked it, and walked away. He then went to Wojciech's shop, where he bought guns, ammunition, and kerosene. Before leaving, he told Wojciech to warn Sheriff Malik about Henry and Keene's plan to seize Black Creek for oil. Wojciech insisted on fighting, but John left on his own, ready for battle. At Henry's base, a cart arrived carrying the coffin with Keene trapped inside. Henry ordered his men to burn Keene and save the coffin for John. Soon after, gunfire erupted and flames spread. Wojciech had set the fires as a diversion. When one guard went to investigate, John ambushed and killed him. The camp went on high alert, and Henry grabbed a rifle. Wojciech climbed onto a roof and shot one of Henry's men. But the others gunned him down. Bullets tore into him until he fell dead. Gasoline spilled onto the attackers below, and when a lit cigarette dropped, one of them went up in flames before his partner put him out with a shot. John saw Wojciech's body and felt regret, but he pressed on. He spotted a gangster dragging Madeleine away, shot him, and freed her. Another man fired at John, wounding him. Henry came out ready to end the fight. One of his men shot at John through the floorboards, but John stabbed him in the eye and killed him. Henry then hit John in the shoulder with a bullet. As Henry closed in, Madeleine fired and struck him in the chest.
I underestimated you, soldier.
John finished it with a final shot to Henry's head. After the fight, John and Madeleine pointed guns at each other, but she lowered hers and walked away. Later, as John prepared to leave, Sheriff Malik arrived with his men. They found Henry and his gang dead. Malik thanked John but grew suspicious when he saw Madeleine with him. His men raised their guns, but John warned them to leave if they wanted to avoid Henry's fate. John and Madeleine left town together. In the end, the oil company took control of Black Creek. So the moral of the story is, never trust stagecoach strangers with too many guns, because your family trip can turn into the worst vacation package deal ever.